Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 multiplayer action. We're here with Malice versus Snitch proper. I actually hadn't played this matchup at all, so I'm here with Turin. We've got Malice up against Snitch here, getting things going right off the bat. Dark Riders with Dread Spears. We've got a couple of Corsair Handbows, 3 Scourge Runner Chariots, more Dark Riders, and a Sorceress Lore of Fire. Snitch coming in hot with a Plague Priest. He's got a couple of Gutter Runners with Poison here. Some Skaven Slaves up front. Dark Riders, or yeah, those are mine going into those Skaven Slaves out on the flank. Rat Ogres there. We've got, yeah, Rattling Guns, the Teeth Breakers. Looks like some Warp Grinders and some Eshin Triads to help hold up the back. So, I'm going to be using the anti-large Scourge Runner Chariots to go after that Plague Furnace, obviously. High value target. Malice also charging straight in the front line here. Looks like we're going to have a Plague Monk, so I'm going to try and get into these Handbows potentially in the Dread Spears. So I'm actually going to pull the Handbows away and try and use them to shoot into the Plague Monks there. They should be able to get some good damage in. Meanwhile, over on the side here, we're getting a pretty good engagement with these Dark Riders, getting kind of smashed by Rat Ogres, but we do get some support of the Dread Spears. Rattling Guns opening up here. They should be able to get some good damage in, but at the same time, you can see that Plague Priest getting punished very hard already by those Scourge Runners' ranged attacks, but we're having to come in melee quite a bit there. Some nice work from the Mortar. I don't have a ton of high-value infantry to shoot at for the Mortar. Even the Slaanesha's Harvesters actually probably be pretty good because of the magic and explosion damage, but I'm going to use my Scourge Runner Chariots to just try and make sure that Turin can't keep these ranged units online very much. Of course, without the Rat Ogres being on station, he doesn't really have the mass to stop this up. The Warp Grinders also could potentially pin me in place there, but they are over in this other engagement for the time being. Over here, the Slaanesha's Harvesters run in. We're going to throw a Soul Stealer and Word of Pain on those Rat Ogres. And also, again, the Eshin's Triads, Ixcha's Triads here, actually. I believe this is the summon, not the actual unit itself. I could be wrong, but Turin has been using that summon and will use it to good effect in this particular battle here. The Avalanche Mortars and the Gutter Runners kind of getting run over again by these Chariots. This critical mass of Chariots is a lot to deal with, but over here you can see Malice just about to get sniped by Snitch, but here comes Zarkan. Suddenly the little assassin rat boy's having to run because, yeah, the big angry demon's coming, and Snitch doesn't really have enough HP to just stand up straight and bang with with Malice, potentially. I mean, he'd be relying on a lot of RNG, potentially. But, yeah, the Warp Grinders in here, they don't have a whole lot of HP, so Malice here, Zarkan rather, should be able to beat them down. But they did use a snare there, try and bail Snitch out, so he's going to pull away there. The Mortar's also pulling away here. Looks like the Plague Priest's going to pull up one more summon. I do have some Corsair Handbows that I can potentially activate now as well. My Fire Sorceress is completely forgotten about for the time being, but that's fine. These Chariots are rolling over much of the army here. A lot of high-value units have been dealt with already, and you can see the bolts shooting in. Gonna have a hard time making direct contact, but there we go. A few good volleys and finally able to finish off that Infernal Furnace. And that will do quite a bit more to damage the balance of power, obviously. Quite a high-value unit there. And Zarkan comes in, starts to just absolutely one-shot these Mortar models, which is not the best time for them. But, ooh, Rat Ogre's coming in with a nice rat hook there. A right rat hook, if you will. Anyway, yeah, the Chariots definitely pretty strong here, and just going to be strong in a number of different matchups. The one thing the Chariots do give you is sort of like a decent mid-range option, right? I say mid, it's kind of like a mid to long-range option, but the Dark Elves don't really have anything in this 150 range, right? Most of their crossbow units have significantly shorter range than something like handguns or, you know, Wood Elf bows, High Elf bows, stuff like that. The Scourge Runner Chariot gives you something that can compete in that range. And not only that, but it's a mobile chariot that's actually very cost-effective in just being a chariot in and of itself, right? A reasonably good armor, good charge bonus, anti-infantry, all of that. Especially when, you know, a Murder's Prowess is proccing off map-wide, you can definitely get a lot of value from these things in melee. So, yeah, Scourge Runner Chariots, I honestly think maybe they should tone down the missile damage a little bit. I hesitate to even say that at this point. It might be a little bit too good, but we'll see. I don't know if they'll absolutely listen to my advice. I'll probably just mention to them to maybe tone it down, even just like 1 or 2 points. But in general, I think it's a very nice tool for the Dark Elves to have in their arsenal because it does fill a role. that they kind of lack, which is, again, that sort of mid-range thing. And just from the Dark Elf side, there's pretty much something for everyone in terms of multiplayer playstyle. You know, if you like your monster mashes, you've got your Beastmaster. If you like kiting and, you know, mobile armies, you've got your Chariots here. Just in general, the new Regiment of Renowned Harpies are going to be fun for a lot of players who like mobile builds also. And, yeah, if you like infantry blob builds, then you've got your Medusa Chariot also, the Blood Rack Chariot, that gives some nice AoE buffs and debuffs to your melee units. They also can compete, again, in the ranged fight a little bit better with the Medusae, so in general, it's something for everyone with the Dark Elves in this DLC. Malice also, if you like very powerful characters, Malice is a pretty good character, and honestly, you know, originally I was thinking he wasn't going to be super competitive in multiplayer, but what he is essentially like a tank archetype lord, right? Somebody like, think about like Vlad, Tyrion to an extent. Tyrion, you know, has a secondary health pool and also has a horse, which makes him a little bit different from most tank lords like Morkar, or, you know, like Belagar, I would argue, is also, he doesn't have regeneration, but, you know, that very high melee defense and durability. Same thing with Gorok, right? They're kind of those infantry tank lords. Because of the regeneration, and again, Malice also has a steed like Tyrion does, but because of the regeneration and the second life pool more than anything that Sarkhan gives you, he actually is sort of like a tank archetype lord, and ends up being reasonably useful in that type of a role. Certainly did very well here, although he did get pretty well murdered by the Deathmaster. Still was able to roll over most of the army there with the Chariots. Slaanesh Harvester is also doing a ton of work there. Didn't use the Corsair handbows super well, but I do like them quite a bit in this matchup. Just kind of shoot at whatever light expensive targets present themselves. And yeah, on Turin's side here, ended up being a little bit rough in terms of the Plague Priest kind of getting shot at by the Scourge Runner Chariots there, but Triads were able to do reasonably decently. Warp Grinders actually did okay as well. And yeah, he did definitely use the summons to good effect on those extra Triads there. Yeah, for the Skaven side, for the new Clan Eshin units, it's going to be interesting to see, you know, kind of how the builds shake out. I do think it, just because Skaven by their nature are a faction, because they're low leadership and, you know, just speed differentials and everything, they do require quite a bit of micro and positioning. So it's going to be interesting, but in the hands of, certainly in the hands of good players like Turin and others, and with some more experience and practice, I do think, especially like these Warp Grinders being able to pin units in place, and some of these other units, you know, you may not necessarily see like full-on Clan Eshin themed builds every time, but certainly some of these units, you might see like a unit or two of Triads, like the new Death Runners, you know, one or two Warp Grinders, maybe not all in one build, but like in each build, right? Mortars certainly can be decent in a number of matchups. So, yeah, definitely very fun stuff. I'm quite excited. Let's just talk a little bit more about each of the factions. I guess this is going to be my one video for today. I'm probably going to be doing a stream today if all plans go according to plan. But let's go ahead and have a look here. So, yeah, for the new Skaven stuff, honestly, I think the Master Assassin you're going to see quite a bit of use of as well, almost more so than Snitch, I would say, just because in a high micro situation, this Looming Dread ability is going to be quite powerful to try and snipe out enemy, you know, lords or lords or heroes, and just having that extra missile debuff and his own missile attack as well is going to be quite nice. It's pretty good damage missile attack there. The weapon strength as well, he has AP anti-infantry and Weeping Blade, not quite as strong as Snitch, and he is pretty squishy as well, but again, with those 3 concealment bombs and Slippery, you can potentially do some pretty funny stuff with him if somebody's trying to outshoot you. Like, let's say you're going up against like Tomb Kings or Dwarfs, I don't know, he could probably work well enough against the Dwarfs, I suppose. He's fast enough, and with the concealment bombs, you can kind of pick and choose where he's going to reveal himself and fight. So yeah, I think the Master Assassin will probably see quite a bit of use. Snitch, a little bit situational, but honestly, he's yeah, he's going to be pretty similar to Queek in a lot of ways, to be honest. As for like who to use when, if you're expecting more magic damage, then I would go with Queek. If you're expecting more armor piercing and not as much magic damage, which is a bit weird to say against Skaven, because that's not something you would typically bring, but I would go with Snitch. And I mean, there's a little bit different utility between the two of them, but they do have sort of a similar role in that they both are kind of Lord Snipers. Queek has a little bit more HP, a little bit more armor, just a little bit more survivable in general, doesn't have quite as good of stats. That being said, he does have his own trophy heads, right, which temporarily gives him a much bigger differential. Regardless, I would definitely recommend running both of them with an assassin as another way to get this assassin trophy. It's a secondary debuff. I mean, Snitch doesn't have trophy heads or the assassin's trophy, and then with Queek, obviously, you can just layer one after the other, or use both if you need to. And then, I mean, armor debuff and the melee defense debuff from Warp Shard armor is pretty good. I think they might have changed the value on this recently. You guys can let me know. I haven't gotten patch notes at this point when I'm recording this, so of course, once those patch notes come out, I will absolutely be sure to give that a read to you guys. I believe this was changed as well. Plus 24 melee attack. I want to say this was different before, but the Dwarf Gouge are actually looking pretty decent these days. But yeah, Queek and Snitch going to be very similar. Snitch, of course, has a hard snare, which it's hard to put a value on that, really. It's only 7 seconds, but it's hard to say whether that's going to be better than using trophy heads, because especially with the Skaven, you can kind of get some overlapping speed debuffs with, you know, like with the suppression effect, with poison and some different things. Especially like if you're taking an Eshin Sorcerer as well. This would be a little bit risky. I would probably recommend going with summons, actually. Eshin Sorcerer is going to be decent, but I think all the lores of magic for Skaven are viable, so it's going to be pretty tough to choose. But, I mean, you could also go with Brittle Bone if you want to go for maximum sniping power. That does have a speed debuff component as well. You could go with something like this, and then maybe just take Skitter Leap and Warp Stars to get that cheap speed proc, and then just to be able to hide Queek as well. And you could also take the Speed of Lycos scroll to be able to hide Queek. But we're going to stick with that, and yeah, maybe kind of build around this. I don't know. I've done some theory crafting. Don't want to show off all my cards yet, because I've got some fun stuff planned. But yeah, speaking on the Dark Elf side then, I've already talked quite a bit, or not quite a bit, but a bit about the Beastmaster. Honestly, I think the Beastmaster is going to be one of the most viable generic lore choices in the game, and you'll see quite a bit of him, especially for players that like that monster-themed builds. He's just super cost-effective, to be honest. And then, yeah, Malice is pretty fun too. I'm not the biggest fan of him as a character. Again, I haven't read the novels, not really attached to him in any way, but certainly I know a lot of people will like him. And just, again, as kind of that infantry archetype lord, if you compare him to Lokir, he is quite a bit more expensive than Lokir when he's up on his steed, but he has, again, basically 2 health pools, not quite, but, I mean, Lokir on foot has the same HP pool as Malice on foot, right? And then he just gets a little bit more up on the steed there, Spite, and then even a little bit more when he transforms into Sarkhan. And of course, both of them have their own self-healing. That being said, Lokir can actually take a dragon, but I would argue if you're going to take a dragon tank, you want Malekith, because he has physical resistance and can also heal himself with magic. I mean, of course, Lokir can also heal, but he has to be in melee to heal, which for a dragon can be a little bit of a problem sometimes. So yeah, a little bit sad day for Lokir, but did they change his stats? I think he had just base anti-infantry before and no AP, but does he have AP now? Wow, he has more weapon strength, actually, than Malice. Okay, so let's actually compare. Oh, this is on the dragon, duh. I'm pretty smart sometimes, guys. Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Anti-infantry, not the best AP in the world, but still pretty good stats. I'd still just think that Malice is going to be a better sort of tank duelist type character. I don't know. I'd be curious to see kind of the differential between their splash attacks and stuff. The other thing about Malice too is he has his own debuffs. I mean, you can't really pick and choose to take these abilities here. You're just sort of stuck with them, but they are pretty good. Blood Price obviously giving him massive extra weapon strength and the damage resistance, and the Demon's Curse with that melee defense component AoE is sort of like a Sword of Crone almost, which is quite nice. Whereas Lokir's stuff is more just for himself. I mean, this -4 leadership, that's okay. It's not amazing. But Foe Seeker, again, okay. Dreaded Duelist is pretty good. But Deadly Onslaught, again, not amazing. I don't know that I necessarily always take that unless he's on the dragon. Helm of the Kraken, I mean, I guess the main benefit of having Lokir over Malice is he's just way cheaper. So you can go way wider on your army, which can be a benefit in and of itself. But, yeah, As for the rest, the new units for the Dark Elves, all very good, very fun and usable in different situations. Bloodrack Shrine is going to be vulnerable to armor-piercing missiles, certainly, but in matchups where you're not going to get shot up too much, so maybe like Beastmen, Bretonia, Warriors of Chaos. I don't know about Vampire Counts, actually, probably, too. That these AoE debuffs might be quite nice to just help kind of drag down their stats a little bit. Yeah, I think those matchups, it'll be pretty decent. The Medusa itself is a little bit more mobile, a little bit less HP, but can work a bit better in melee and also fighting other monsters. Pretty squishy, kind of glass cannony, but it can do some decent work in some certain situations if you protect it right. Yeah, and then Scourge Runner Chariots, I've talked to death about. These things are fantastic. ROR Harpies, also quite good, especially if you're supporting them, say, like with a Manticore, or just basically using them as like a support unit, or if you need to tie down a unit for a long time, because they have high melee defense. They also have regeneration, so they're surprisingly hard to kill in melee. If someone doesn't get like a charge with a unit of cavalry on them, then they're going to actually hold up for quite a long time and can do a number on just cleaning up a backline of low-tier troops while taking very, very little damage. That's quite nice. Yeah, just pretty decent stuff overall. I would say if you're into playing Dark Elves or Skaven from a multiplayer perspective, this DLC is well worth it. The Skaven side, things are going to be a little bit trickier to use, but if we pop back over there just briefly, yeah, you can see the Warp Grinders. These things are potentially the best unit in the DLC because of the ability to pin units in place, but they're also very, very tough to use. Very squishy, just will fall over pretty quickly in general, but this Warp Quake and the Seismic Snare in particular, of course, is going to be quite powerful if you have the ranged units or other units to follow it up, like freeze units in place, get a big charge in with a bunch of wheels and stuff, get a big Death Frenzy, or, you know, big Monster Blob or something. I don't know. There's some different things you could do potentially there. But certainly ROR Death Runners, the Evictions Death Squad, they seem interesting. I want to use them in some more matchups, but their melee stats are just so good once this Duck and Weave is active. And of course they have their strength in numbers active as well. On that initial clash, they're going to have very high melee defense, very good stats, low HP pool, low model count, but potentially an extremely powerful unit in some certain matchups. I think against most of the Elvish factions, as long as you're not going to come against magic damage, yeah, I would say probably not the Wood Elves, just because Dryads would tear these guys apart, I think, with their magic damage. But against, yeah, Dark Elves or High Elves, I think these guys would probably be a pretty good pick. Maybe against Warriors of Chaos as well. Dwarves, obviously, if you could get them into a backline, they'd probably tear some Dwarf troops apart. So, yeah, fun stuff there. Triads, in matchups where you don't want to necessarily take Death Runners, but you still want some Weeping Blade to be able to drag down large targets with, like, mass missile fire, or, you know, if you want to help support, like, some Storm Vermin in some infantry engagements if you need to, then just having the basic Triads is pretty good. Death Runners also, again, got a little bit of a change with this DLC, only 850 now, lower model count like the Triads, but it's kind of an anti-infantry variant, so you can kind of bring one or the other when you need them. ROR I like quite a bit, actually, for this Doppelgang summon. Even just using it to chase routing units, tie your opponent's units up, it's quite useful to have just that extra summon, right? Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. The Death Globe Mortars, the Poisoned Wind Globadiers also got changed here. They're no longer anti-large. They have this Poison Wind effect. I haven't really tested the damage too much, but just, you know, going purely by feel, it seems like they're pretty decent. And obviously the Death Globe Mortar is just going to do straight up damage, and that does apply as well to the Bombardiers. So, fun stuff, well worth it all around. Skaven, I need to do a little bit more testing with, but certainly some potentially very, very good tools. Dark Elf stuff seems a little bit more straightforward, but there's certainly something in there for everyone. And let's not forget about our free update, Réponse de l'INS and Henri le Massif, coming at you for Bretonia. So, thank you for watching. Hopefully I didn't ramble on too long. Actually, probably the post-analysis was longer than the video in and of itself. But since this is the one battle I have got so far between these two proper, I sort of figured I would give you my general thoughts on the DLC at this point. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button so every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.